Bismillah. So every once in a while, we end up selecting a topic which rattles some people. Unknowingly, we don't even mean to do it, and it just happens. The last time this happened, I was threatened. I received private messages from people saying, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, get ready. And I was asked to become wary and watch my back. The last time this happened to me is when we spoke on the subject of feminists. And if it wasn't enough that I was a man, it wasn't enough that I had a beard, it was because I was a Muslim bearded man talking on this topic of feminism. And that too was a criticism by some Muslim women. Today's topic is about taking chances for divorced people. Again, I've received some backlash because of certain stereotypical labels that have been used, and I've put them out there. But how can we address an issue without addressing the issue? So because we were told not to go ahead with this, that's exactly what we're going to do straight after this. Defiance, Coach Taf. That's the keyword for today. Wa alaikum assalam, everybody who's joined so far. Abu Alamgir, Zinat, Shahanara, Becky. Right, the topic is about taking chances. So, Coach Taf, what are chances that are worth taking?
Well, you're taking a chance tonight, I guess. Start off
Yeah,
with that one.
well, I'm always taking chances. I'm a chance taker. I'm a bit of a trier. I always take my chances.
I like that spirit. I like that spirit. And I've joined the bandwagon of taking chances as well. I think in life, if you live in the comfort zone, then as they say, your learning and experience will be limited. So yeah, I'm with you on this one. I'm with you on this one, inshallah.
Yeah, I mean, the topic today was to be discussing how a lot of the times we come across. I mean, I think this changes between cultures and cultures, and it changes within different parts of the world and how people are viewed if they've been married before, or if they've been in a or they've been divorced, or if they've been widowed, and somebody who's been in a relationship, and whether they should be taking a chance in moving on, or somebody should be taking a chance with them.
Mm.
I just want to address the elephant in the room, me, other than me, but the elephant in the room being the fact that I'd actually mentioned the term used goods
Yeah.
in the body of the promo material, and a lot of people took issue to that,
They did.
and as what tends to happen sometimes is some people jump the gun and come to their own conclusions before they've even listened to the discussion, and just by looking at the promo material or the content behind promoting the actual podcast or the topic, they make their minds up, and you're telling them, look, why don't you just wait till the conversation's taken place?
Well,
Now,
in a way, they've shot the messenger, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't. I mean, if I'm not going to say it. Actually, that'll get me into more trouble because sometimes you've got to listen to the different sides before
Yeah.
you derive to a conclusion. Because oftentimes, in all sorts of relationships, whether it's personal or professional, if you're going to just shoot and then aim afterwards, it's
Yeah.
not going to work. You need to be able to try and be objective as possible and listen to all sides of the argument or the story, as the case might
The
be.
interesting thing is, Majid, though, I mean, it's why were there certain assumptions made in the first place?
100%. And in,
Right.
in NLP, we refer to presuppositions, and
Yes,
you
exactly.
know, and yeah, and one could argue that maybe it's something that's is triggering for them.
It is absolutely, and the thing is that each one of us will be triggered by different things, and this is
Mm,
the truth. Knowledge is out there, understanding is out there, the differences are out there as well, and it's not
mm,
the case that we will agree with everything. Even you and I might not agree on everything.
yeah.
And the most, I think, honorable thing for us as human beings, because someone mentioned human beings in all of this conversation, is to really give people a chance to explain themselves,
Mm,
right? Hear and be heard.
mm,
Because with that, what happens, you have growth.
mm,
When you're able to hear someone else's point of view, you can actually understand it from their point of view. And if you take a different opinion to that, then absolutely articulate that opinion, that difference,
mm,
but do it in such a way that it's founded, it's got some validation, it's got some substance behind it. Now, my wife always says, separate facts and feelings,
mm.
right? And that's so profound
She sounds
because
like a wise woman.
mashallah, she is, yes, she is, mashallah. Hence, alhamdulillah, she chose me. But that's a different story. And the thing is that, feelings are there. They're feelings, right? And we will be moved by different things.
Hmm.
Some things based upon experiences, some on observing other people, some on what we hear. Now, facts are facts, right? And when we're able to separate facts and feelings, I think we can have better understanding.
Yeah, and I think sometimes someone's facts are based on their perceptions, and their perception is their fact, their reality. Perceptions are reality, right? Because we see something and we perceive something to be true, and it's true for us. The number 6 and 9 analogy always comes to mind, depending on which angle you're looking at the number from. But at the same time, if you're going to argue a point, you can't throw red herrings, or straw or draw straw man arguments. You've got to present facts, as you mentioned, as to why it's not appropriate to embark on something or not. Just by claiming that I shouldn't be talking, or you and I shouldn't be talking on this topic because we're men,
Okay.
this was to me, why? Because I'll tell you why. For me, I actually explicitly mentioned used goods,
Hmm.
in inverted commas. Admittedly, I added the inverted commas a couple of minutes afterwards when I realized actually this could be
This one's true. Yeah.
slightly interpreted, misinterpreted even. Because surprisingly, the first time I'd heard that term was by a woman towards a man.
Right. Okay.
She referred to a man
Mhm.
as used goods
Oh,
because some guy was divorced and wasn't good enough for her daughter.
and she
This
she was presumably single then, never been married before.
She was the mother-in-law.
Yeah,
No,
but her
so
daughter was
her
never.
daughter was, yeah, her daughter was single. The second time I'd heard it was by a woman referring to another woman as used
Right.
goods. It's
Mhm.
it in the first few instances it was never referred to a woman by a man.
Mhm.
And this is what surprises people because they feel that maybe it's men who are referring to women as used goods if they've been divorced
Mhm.
or if they've been in a couple of different marriages. But again, presuppositions and assumptions being made here, which have derived to certain conclusions without even realizing actually there's a context behind this discussion. Why
There
don't we
is.
just hold our horses,
yeah.
get calm, take a breath. Let's not get emotional about all these things, and actually listen to these guys and hear them out and see exactly what they're talking about. And the exact thing happened when we talked about feminists, because I tell you what, I had threats against me. I had
Wow.
people messaging me privately to say, like, these certain individuals who are making these comments, they're after people's reputations. They're not just feminists, they're feminazis, right?
Right.
Or militant feminists, and just watch out, and your reputation will be on the line. I don't give it, to it. So I'm just going to continue with what we're on, and in fact, it just proved that the loudest noises aren't the most popular ones in terms of opinions, and most of the comments we had that day in the comment section were people who argued against the current contemporary feminist position
Okay.
as which is being
Okay.
uh, populated. So on this particular topic was the same thing. I thought to myself, well, it's amazing how people always feel that just because we're men, we're talking about a topic, it doesn't affect us. We have, sisters, wife, mother, daughters, and it affects us.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So,
I could speak in the first person. Absolutely,
well, there you
absolutely.
go.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
for it.
I mean, we don't even have to just guess this or say my client said this and so said this or my friend. I
Yeah.
could speak in the first person.
Well,
I,
well.
I am not somebody who would be coveted, right? Given that I've been married before and I have children, right? Therefore, my image is tarnished in that respect. For
Wow.
someone who hasn't been married before and doesn't have children,
Hmm.
I'm gonna guess now, and people on this, live can tell me the same or otherwise. Would somebody consider myself, who's been married before and with children, would they consider me, or would they consider somebody who's single, never been married before, and doesn't have children?
Hmm.
And why would they choose one over the other? And that's the most important thing to ask oneself, not me to answer that question, is for
Hmm.
all of us to ask that question. Do we have our own prejudices?
Hmm. Yeah. I think I think there's also again, and I would say this is more prominent in certain other parts of the world than it is in the Western world, where the likes of things like used goods, those kinds of terms are being used, and they it's a very much a cultural thing that because I think divorce is one of those things which people have shunned, irrespective of the context behind it.
Mhm.
Is provided as a solution, and in some instances,
Yes.
it's the right thing to do. It's a way out which has been provided. I
Mhm.
think there are certain religious um, teachings in some religions where you will die when you die you're gonna die leaving your husband's house, basically saying
Oh
that
yeah,
if
yeah,
your
yeah,
husband
yeah.
dies,
You will
you'll
never marry
still
again. You will
yeah,
never
you'll
marry.
never marry again.
Yeah.
And these are all cultural things which have been mixed in.
Yeah. And the question there, Majid, is this then: what's behind that? What's behind that? That once you have lost your husband, or he's actually left you, or you've divorced, that the culture says that never again. That's it.
Mm,
They say that your coffin, your
yeah, yeah,
coffin will actually leave your home.
yeah.
Never get married again. There are so
That's
many things behind that.
mm,
It's kind of inbred into the culture, and it's so strong. I personally know people of my parents' generation who have not been with anyone for 30, 40, and 50 years. Not 30,
mm,
40, 50 days, or 2 years, or 3 years, or 10 years, up to 50 years. And that
mm,
is such a strong grip that's been on them all that
mm.
time. And so there's a reality there.
Yeah,
There's
I
this.
know. I know of families, or I know of women whose husbands died whilst they were still in their 20s, and they never got married again. And I don't think it was because they didn't want to.
Mhm.
It was the pressures of the
Yeah,
families and the culture around them.
yeah, yeah. No, no, absolutely,
And that,
absolutely.
to some degree, is still transferred over to the next generation because they've seen that firsthand. And people tend to still have the stigma around people who have been married or maybe even have kids. And if you've got kids, that's like baggage in inverted commas, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like Sister Zenith says, divorcees suffer trauma due to society ideology, especially with kids. She is seen as a baggage, and that's very unfortunate. The question is, what do you do about that? You know, how do you work your way around that? How do you, as the individual who's going through this situation, work through that? And how do the people around you work with you to help you
Okay,
through that? That's
okay.
that's
So
the real question, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm going to quote some statistics here. And this is from research what my wife and I have done of Muslims experiencing divorce and their comments of how that was for them. So I'm going to share with you, and we've got some real hard data here, graphs, charts, numbers, people, real people. And so the sample told us that 47% of them, 47% of respondents, and we have 300 in our sample, right?
Wow.
It's not a small number,
Mm.
that emotional well being affected them. Now, just for
These are
one
these
month,
are these people who had been divorced.
divorce, yeah.
Okay, these are
And
divorces.
now the effects of divorce were that 47% were affected by emotional well being. Now, if we pause for 1 second, imagine your worst moments and your emotional well-being isn't really great and you're feeling down, you're feeling sad, maybe depressed, thinking, you have apathy, you don't want to move on with life. 47% of people who experience divorce don't feel like moving on. What does that tell us about the effects of divorce? So divorce is a loss, a kind of a loss. And with every loss, you have a trauma. And that trauma manifests itself in different ways. For these people, 47%, they had this affecting of their emotional well-being. 43% of them said it affected their mental health. Imagine 43% saying my mental health's been affected by my divorce. And that's
Yeah,
no small thing here. We're talking
it's
about
not. It's
big
almost
numbers.
half. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then 38% said that they feel loneliness. And I'm sure people watching this live will concur. You feel lonely when you're divorced. You know, you've had this person in your life, you've done all these things with them, you've had a life, social life,
You know
private
what?
life.
You know
Yeah.
what? The Coach Taff. It's a nice link to this comment which Sister Sarah just put up. I also think certain coaches that marry within the family, there's a lot more to lose, including family ties, and that there are people who pretend to be married
Yes.
still to keep the honor, will turn up to weddings, etc. together. I have personally seen this. And when you mention that this affects them and they feel lonely, there are people who are married who are feeling lonely.
Oh, subhanAllah. Now you've hit another nerve there.
It's true though, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
There are married people who feel lonely. I mean,
Yes.
aside from the fact that everybody should have their space anyway, I'm always, advocating every man needs a cave, right? And people should have a little bit of a space of their own,
Like the one behind you, right?
like the one behind me. Yeah, yeah. So the reality is there's a lot of disconnect between couples where they do start to feel lonely and they don't, and then what they tend to do is look for companionship, and they may look for friendship or some kind of a connection elsewhere, and that becomes another dangerous situation. And this links back to our previous podcast about should I stay or should I go.
Yes. Yes.
What value is there in that relationship? Now, if you've got kids, then it gets a little bit more complicated and complex. But if you've already made that step and you've come out of that relationship and you've taken that step to sever those ties, especially in those situations where there are joint marriages and within families, you're not
Yes.
just losing a half, you're losing some family members with it, and that loneliness suddenly compounds into being boycotted in some families, and
Yes.
being left to your own device, and nobody wants to talk to you. You're not allowed to be spoken to, and
Absolutely.
that has a different kind of an effect. And then if those people who are then boycotted and they're wanting to move on in life, what do? I mean, in their own circles, they're already tarnished. Their reputation is tarnished without, it might not even be their fault. And and who's to blame anybody anyway, right? Only the couples themselves know what's actually going on.
Yeah.
And then, whoever's got the stronger family
Yes.
influences and whichever side
Yeah.
gets to kind of
Yes.
steer the narrative.
Oh yeah. No, no. It's actually ludicrous. You know, and what happens is we give power,
Mm,
right, to others where we should actually regain power. And what I mean by that is that when something like that affects you, when you've divorced or you've separated, or you become a widower,
mm,
it has an effect on you. I mean,
mm.
I've personally worked with somebody who lost his wife,
Wow.
and it's taken 2 years for him, mashallah, to now he's getting married soon, inshallah. But,
MashaAllah.
but
MashaAllah.
the thing is that that process of healing was real, brother. It was
Yeah.
raw because
Yeah.
he loved this woman.
Mm,
He loved her to bits. He lost her, and he was and everybody can understand this. When you love someone dearly, or you've been with
mm.
someone for so many years, and you've had this life with them,
Yeah.
that severance,
I
is
know.
you
I,
know
I know somebody who's been through that. I don't know whether he's watching or not, and I'm always trying to encourage him to look forwards. Oh, we've never really had like a coaching session or anything, and he's a wonderful brother, and everybody speaks very highly of him. But he himself, by his own admission, will say there are things which prevent people like in that situation to move forward because they
yeah.
don't feel like they've got that in them anymore to give.
Right. So this is the thing. Actually, it's a beautiful segue in what I wanted to mention is the
Mm,
first thing that one must do. And again, first-hand experience now is I literally felt like a failure on a
wow,
personal level
wow,
because it was my second divorce, not first, second.
wow,
Second divorce in my 50s.
wow.
I'm not spring chicken, right?
Mm,
In
no, I
my
think you are.
50s,
I think you
second
still
divorce.
you still
Right.
pull a few
That
weights.
okay.
you
And I think
you still got it in you, bro.
alhamdulillah, but I think that that's the journey everyone must take. The first thing a person must do is stop talking down to themselves.
Yeah, it's the inner dialogue, isn't it?
It's the inner dialogue. And some wonderful brother said, look, you didn't fail, the relationship failed.
Yeah.
And I said, oh my God, thank you for mentioning that, because there was such a burden upon me to actually even uh, listen to those voices, internal voices, that I can't do
Mm,
this. And I said, okay, it failed between two people. Now, once you overcome that hurdle, the most important thing after that is you must stop thinking about self-love. Now, I think a brother mentioned it here. A brother, oh, you got it on the screen now. It talks about,
okay. Sister Abi Irshad.
oh yes, okay, sister.
Isn't
Apologies.
this lack of self-love and self-worth, etc., within a person, and this is why I feel this way, and
Yeah.
people feel
So
this way,
let
and
me
so on.
just add to this is that when I speak to people about self-care
Mm,
and be self-centered,
mm,
what they think that means is being selfish.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
So being
common
self,
misconception. Yeah.
yeah, self-centered means being selfish. As they don't know, think of self-centered being as soul-centered.
Yeah.
Put it in that frame of reference, soul-centered, and
It's
start to
it's
heal.
because of the in the context we've been used to hearing that term, which is why we would think it's a negative thing.
Absolutely, there's a negative connotation to it.
Mm,
So the minute you see it differently, that actually this is going to be part of my healing, and I deserve to have this, then you can start the journey. Because I guarantee most people actually don't believe they deserve it.
mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And I emphasize that point. There's a belief that I don't deserve a second chance.
Yeah.
And if you believe that, guess what's going to happen? You ain't going to work for a second chance.
Mm,
But the minute that switches in your mind, in my mind, the switch was that I deserve a version 2.0 of me.
mm,
It wasn't to get married again. It
mm,
was just because I felt as though I, besides everyone else, for myself, deserve to have a version 2.0 of me.
mm.
Why? Because I had neglected myself. That's my belief.
Yeah.
And the minute that actually entered my mind, I started to take the steps, many steps, to work towards making that a reality. And I guarantee you, those people who have experienced divorce or a separation, the major block is that belief that they can even move on or should even move on. Because I saw some comments about people being depleted,
Mm,
exhausted, have got no love left. Don't worry about love left for anybody else.
mm, yeah. Yeah.
Just repair yourself first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it's a deep and complex topic because everybody's situation will be different. Whether it depends on the circumstances with which that severance took place, like in a severing of those relationships took place, and what was resulting at the end of that in terms of the family makeup, friends, or whatever. And this will always have an impact on the way people do move on, should they want to move on.
Yes.
I don't think everybody needs to move on.
True. I agree with you.
I think there are people who are happy and content within their uh, circumstances, whichever they may be, as a single person. And if that's the way they want to keep it, then that's perfectly fine. You don't have to. If the pressure in someone's life is resulting of this society's expectation for you to move on, and that's bogging you down, thinking, I'm expected to move on, but I'm
Yes.
not ready yet. And that's fine. I think a lot of the times, at the school gates, the chitter chatter at the school gates, or relatives or friends of the family, then the little nosy pokies who want to try and get people to open up and discuss and get some gossip. They have more expectations on us than we do on ourselves.
Yeah.
And then
Exactly.
sometimes we make decisions for our future based on society's expectations as opposed to what we feel content with or what we
No, no,
might feel happy
no,
with.
no, absolutely. I mean, I have a one-liner that says, because people sometimes ask me, when will I know I'm ready? I
Mm,
says, when you're ready is when you are confident in yourself despite your relationship status,
yeah.
meaning you have no longer any energy that's directed towards finding this person. It's more about you're actually content where you are.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
think when yeah,
Yeah, 100%. And that might be it. I mean, I'm the kind of guy who's happy in my own company. I can spend, long periods of time just by myself. I'm that kind of a guy. But not everybody's like that. We are social creatures. We all need some kind of social interaction. Hence, social media is there for us.
yeah,
But there are times when, in terms of relationships, it's not the right solution for everybody. I've come across, I mean, a sister mentioned it in the comment section of the promo for this on my personal profile about, not everybody wants to be in that position where they're having to cook or clean after somebody, or where they're going to have to do certain errands or have certain expectations. They'd rather have a husband who they don't even cohabit with, they don't even live with. They're in that situation or that level of their life or stage in their life where they're not wanting a full-time relationship. They would rather they miss the companionship, but that's about it, nothing more than that. And maybe she said what would suit her is being like a second wife. And ironically, I think you and I were having this discussion like just a few days before that. We've come across people who have had very successful relationships with having or sisters who have decided to be a second wife because they don't want to have the hassles of having a full-time husband, and and it's worked well for them. I mean, obviously, you have flip side of the coin where you've got horror stories, and I've come across many of them as well. But one thing, you know what, Tough? One thing I've noticed is over time, in the last, I'd say 5 or 6 years, I've come across more and more stories of people entering these kinds of relationships, second wife relationships, as like sisters of their own choice, because they do want the companionship, but they don't want much more than that because they want to retain the independence
yeah,
and everything else. Now, obviously, that's not going to be for everybody. Let's just get that one out of the way.
yeah.
But for those who want it and it's worked for, it's a solution, isn't it?
Absolutely, solution is in our faith.
Mm.
And I think the same applies whether you are married to one wife or more than one wife. The most important thing is for the woman is to do a due diligence, and you know about due
100%.
diligence, right? And the same thing applies. Look, a bad human being is a bad human being.
Yeah,
Whatever he
100%.
professes to follow is another thing.
Mm.
A good human being is a good human being, and there's
Yeah,
good and bad in all walks of life.
100%. Yeah.
So don't, and no one should be fooled in thinking if this person professes to follow a
Mm.
faith, our
Mm.
faith,
Mm.
right, is going to be spot on,
100%. It
right?
doesn't matter. He might be a mullah. It doesn't make any difference because I've heard the worst stories I've heard is about people who have a practicing outlook about them.
Well, this is it,
Unfortunately,
quote unquote practicing. So this is
yeah,
the thing, you see.
yeah,
The Prophet ﷺ said about the man in particular, the one who has faith and good character,
mm,
not just
mm,
a faith, right? Good character, like
mm.
they both go
There's
hand
a
in hand.
distinction made, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is that this is where the due diligence comes in. There are many different facets to how you do the background checks and the due diligence.
Yeah. Mm,
The most important thing that I always say is this: look, is that you have to begin to respect yourself in order to
mm.
expect someone else to respect you.
Yeah. What standards are you giving other
Yeah,
people to follow about you?
yeah, exactly. So if you lower your standards, you're gonna. I don't know. I think it's going to be the case that you're going to find someone who doesn't meet a high standard, your standard. But if you
Yeah,
raise your
yeah.
standard,
Well, you've got a really good point there. And I think within that concoction of the requirements in terms of the standards, there's got to be a lot of things that you need to take into consideration. We're talking about taking chances,
yeah,
but a chance has to present itself for it to be taken. If you let's just say somebody's in that situation where they're going through a courting phase with somebody, and that person happens to be, I don't know, a man who's married, but he's not offering marriage, then there is no chance there.
no,
And if
exactly.
if then if something is offered, that's not a chance. Then it's a chance towards hell, not towards righteousness
Well,
and being, a good Muslim or a good
piety,
person,
yeah,
irrespective of your faith. Then
yeah,
then what you're doing is
yeah.
that's something completely different. If
And
marriage is not on the cards, then what are you in?
well, imagine, you know what the truth is. I mean, and again, the elephant in the room is this. Unfortunately, anyone who gets divorced, right, will be affected by it. Like I said before, it's a kind of a loss, it's a separation, it's a severance, but people will deal with it differently.
Mm,
But everyone's affected.
mm,
The most important thing is this: we've got to realize is that when you separate from someone and
mm,
you're affected by it emotionally, mentally, like we heard before, and you have that loneliness, guess what's going to happen? You're going to exude a sense of desperation in some
mm,
cases,
mm.
right? If you haven't done the work, if you have low self-esteem, low sense of
Yeah,
self-worth,
yeah.
you believe that you don't deserve a second chance, and
Mm,
Prince Charming comes along, or Princess comes along,
yeah.
what's going to happen, right? Endorphins are going to go, and you're going to be actually overcome by emotions more than the facts, and you may
Mm.
succumb to those emotions, and unfortunately it may end up being that you end up with the wrong person. And therefore it's really critical to realize that some people, because of their status, relationship status, are more vulnerable.
Yeah, and you know what? That applies to both married
Yeah.
and single people. Whether you're looking to get into a relationship for the first time, marriage for the first time, or whether it's somebody who is considering marriage with somebody who's another divorcee or somebody who's already married, maybe as a second wife, it works in both ways. And then those requirements. I mean, it would be silly for you to go around second time and make the same mistakes.
Mhm.
And this is where you need to take even more of your time to make sure things are right. Number two, Henna Malik has mentioned that there's a thing in our communities, especially when people say, Log kya kahenge?
Yeah.
What will people say? And it's a pointed question, except if it matters.
Yeah.
Why would it matter to you? You know, one of the number one, in fact, the number one regret of the dying people when they're in, there was a survey done, and I mentioned this in one of my videos in my private group, the top five regrets of the dying, and the number one regret of people who are dying in these wards where they're going through the end of life,
Mm.
and a survey that was done, is that I wish I'd lived a life true to myself rather than what other people have expected of me.
Now,
And
now,
then
now, Majid, that go on, carry on, carry on.
yeah, so I was just gonna link
Yeah,
that to, even if you're single and you are wanting to get married, or whether you are a divorcee and you're wanting to get married to another single person or divorced person, or even somebody who's married, you know what? Do your due diligence and say Bismillah, because you know there are things that have prevented people from being happy, and sometimes it's the cross-cultural things. Oh, she's not, first of all, is she even Pakistani, is she
right.
even Indian, is she even Bangladeshi, is she even, you know, and then you've got which cult caste is she from, is she a Mughal, Jat, or whatever, whatever. And then you've got, okay, then the last question is, okay, what kind of a Muslim is she? Is she
Right.
a Deobandi? Is she a Barelvi? Is she, then you think, well, come on, man, where is this going to end? You do your due diligence. Obviously, it's got to be somewhat educated, consult the right people, but the right people, not just people, the right people. And you know what? It doesn't make any of this color, caste, creed, all these things. They prevent people from moving on in a happy way, in a content way, at least anyway.
No, they do, and I think, Majid, it goes back to that same point again. If a person has, you mentioned a really important point about people, healing, and
Mm.
what we say is that what you don't repair follows you. It
Mm.
will, it will
Yeah.
follow you to the next marriage without any doubt. There's no issues about that because you haven't repaired it, and it's going to surface at some point.
Mm.
So you have to repair. You have to do the repair work, which is integral. It's really for your own sanity, and to avoid all that heartache again.
Mm.
I guess the most important point I'd like to make is this: when we're considering taking chances, what happens is when you're going to take a second chance, whether it's male or female, there's an inner voice that'll tell you it's going to happen again.
Mm.
The number of times I've heard people saying, well, what if divorce happens again?
Mm.
What if I get divorced again?
Yeah, they're already thinking of the problem before anything's even happened.
Yeah. So don't think about the pink elephant, right?
Yeah.
You start to bring this reality into a real manifestation, because you
Yeah.
keep thinking about that thing, and
Yeah.
you can kind of pretty much pave the way to that.
Exactly. Yeah, you're always thinking about it, so it's going to materialize at some point if it's thought
Right.
about so often anyway. Yeah.
So when you've done the repair work, doesn't mean that you won't get feelings that really scare you.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that sometimes you feel like that, what have I done?
Mm.
Uh, I was happier with this situation or that situation. It doesn't mean that those things will come up because something's surfacing, right? What it tells you is that there's some residual emotional, let's call it undealt with, not baggage. I will use baggage. Undealt with emotions,
Mm.
right? They
Mm.
still need to be worked with,
Unaddressed emotions. Yeah.
unaddressed. Absolutely.
Mm.
And what you need to do is really bring them to the surface. Be conscious of those feelings, right? Ask yourself, where are they coming from? Is it a
Mm.
fact or is it a feeling,
Mm.
right? And do the work that's necessary for you to actually get over that emotional trauma or that feeling.
Yeah.
There's a really important thing that Victoria actually, when we were caught in, that she said that helped me overcome my fear. So
Wow.
she asked me this question. I think it's going to be really relevant for the audience. She asked me a question directly. She said, would you ever get married again? Now, this is a guy who divorced twice,
Mm.
thinking he's failed. Somebody corrected him, but he still had something in him. Now, this was what was going inside my mind, was that I cannot let anybody into my life again because my heart's already been broken,
Mm.
right? And I cannot even envision going through that ever again.
Mm.
But she
Yeah.
said she gave me a one-liner that like completely changed everything.
Yeah.
And I guess you're all waiting for the one-liner, right?
Yeah. Go on then. Surprises.
So she said, be guarded yet open in case the right person comes along.
Ah. Okay.
She
Yeah.
gave me permission to guard my heart because that's what I wanted. Bottom line was this, that I wanted to guard myself.
Mm.
It was very painful. People who've
Mm.
been through divorce can relate to this. It was painful. She said, be guarded yet open. I thought, wow, there's a balance. Guard
Mm.
myself,
Mm.
but be open in case, something else is on the horizon. And I think that advice would be very poignant in this case, that when we're talking about second time around or second chance, is look,
Or third chance, isn't it?
yeah, in my case, yeah,
Or
third chance.
third in your case, and might be fourth in somebody else's,
Yeah, no,
if not
absolutely.
more.
Absolutely. And the thing is that never give up on yourself. And that's what you're doing essentially. For those sisters who wrote on your post,
Hmm.
what I read was they'd given up on themselves.
Yeah, and you know what? A part of that wasn't just themselves, because if you remember, there was a comment from Iram who wrote that there were certain types of expectations, that she was told that she had to lower her standards, and that she couldn't take certain options anymore because she'd been divorced and she's got kids, and she didn't realize what that actually meant until she wrote it down for the very first time in our post. And it's amazing what transformations happen in your own mind, what realizations come about when you tend to either vocalize something
Yes.
or you write it down,
Yeah.
and you've written it down and think and take an ownership of what you've written, because that's what you've meant, it's what you're thinking, it's what you're feeling. And these kind of emotional things which manifest inside us in our unconscious minds and hearts in some
Yes.
cases, they evolve and they start bubbling away, and they have an effect on us without even realizing that what kind of an effect they're having on us. And then, because all these things had been said, somehow in the back of your mind you start to believe it, that maybe I do need to lower my standards, maybe I can't look for a single guy, maybe I can't look for this option or that option, or maybe I'll upset this side of the family if I choose somebody outside our culture, if
Yeah.
I go for a non-Asian, or if I go somebody who's married, or if I go for somebody who's not even in this country, or if I go for somebody who's a different
Yeah.
caste system, they
Yes.
start to kind of pull themselves down because of the expectations of everybody else, and it's been bubbling in their minds and in their hearts, and it's become their identity without even them realizing it. And until they start, as you mentioned, until they start digging deep on every single point that they've believed about themselves and scrutinize that,
Yes.
um, they're not going to come to the realization that actually this isn't even my own. This isn't
No.
something I even believe about myself. This isn't
No.
something that's just been handed over to me, and I'm expected to believe it about me.
Yeah. No. Majid, I mean, what we say is all the time we say that your emotions are a messenger,
Mm,
right? They're giving you a message.
yeah,
And this comment by Abby is about when you get triggered. Basically, what's happening is you're being sent a message loud and clear. Listen to me,
yeah,
right? I've been triggered right now. I'm trying to tell you something. Listen to what I'm trying to tell you. Now, what usually happens is we numb those feelings,
mm,
right? Because they're uncomfortable.
mm,
What they can do, they can reveal something about our fears, our worries, our worst nightmares, apprehensions, all sorts of things. The key is actually that the messenger is trying to tell us something about ourselves. And what we've got to do is we've got to actually lean into those emotions, albeit they are uncomfortable, because what we want to do is we want to decode what that message is. It might be the case, like I've said this before, my case was that I had childhood trauma of abandonment. So my messenger, my emotions were telling me each and every single time that, Taf, you are going to be abandoned right now. right? So don't go ahead with this. Yeah.
Mm.
For me, the biggest revelation was that when I realized that that was the case, is that now I could do something about that. Because before I had these emotions and I didn't know where they were coming from. I was overcome with tears and all sorts of things, but I'm none the wiser because I don't know what to do next. But that,
You know what? This is a very, very important point. Sorry, do you want to finish that? And I was going to
no, no,
add on to
okay,
it.
okay,
Yeah. Yeah. So I was just going to say, whether you're single or whether you're divorced, it makes no difference because this is something that everybody should be going through, ideally, before they even get married for the first time. What are my reasons for getting married? What do I expect out of this marriage? What is this person going to give me in this marriage? And there's no harm and there's nothing wrong in asking, okay, what do you bring to the table?
mhm,
I had a discussion with somebody not too long ago, and then the woman felt offended that the man had the audacity to ask, well, what do you bring to the table?
right, yeah,
And maybe not in a strong way, but they kind of felt confused. Well, why would the man ask? I'm there, I'm going to cook, I'm going to clean, I'm going to do this, I'm going to hold the door open when he comes back from work, and I'm going to do all those lovely things. But what if he still asks, well, what do you bring to the table? What does that actually mean? She's leaving everything behind for you in a traditional setup.
okay,
And my answer to that was it's not necessarily all those things. There are some things which are specific to some people, what they want in their marriage. Do
mhm,
they feel that this woman or this man is going to be an enabler or a disabler? Are they going to be a motivator or a demotivator? Are they going to push me out the door and kick me out to get something done when
mhm,
I'm feeling lazy? Or are they going to cuddle up to me and say, look, koi gal nahi, ghar baith. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
it's
I mean,
okay,
I'd
take
rather
care.
have the former to say, kick me out, get me, because some things just need to get done. So they need to figure these kinds of things out.
Mhm.
So there's no harm in asking those questions. And one of
No,
the things that's most important is whether somebody is single or whether they've come off a broken relationship or a divorce settlement or whatever. People need to understand themselves first
mhm,
before they get into a relationship to propose a partnership of any kind,
yeah,
um, or propose marriage or relationship, especially the second time if you're not already done it the first time. Because if your first marriage has failed for whatever reason, it's the marriage that's failed, as you mentioned. It's not you as an individual. In some cases, it is the individual. Let's not shy about these things.
yes,
But where the situation is that a relationship has failed before going into another relationship, if that's what they choose to do, because that's not always the right solution either,
mhm,
if that's what they choose to do, well, find out who you are yourself. If you're going to go around talking about the deen and posting, I don't know, very religious stuff, and then start to do the opposite in your relationship
mhm,
endeavors,
mhm.
then there's going to be a
There's a book,
dichotomy there,
yeah,
and there's a
yeah,
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 what's that term that we used? Um, yeah, there's going to be a conflict within you, and then you're not going to be at rest anyway, especially
yeah.
if you have any kind of faith. But
But
whether
listen,
you're single or whether you're in a relationship or whether you've been divorced,
sure,
in either case, first
yeah,
find yourself, and then
yes,
find somebody to match you. Because if
sure.
you don't know who you really are, you're not
Mhm.
going to know what's good for you. You're not
Well,
going to know what's bad for you.
imagine the thing is that uh, you may have often heard this, but I have. When I get married, I'll be good again,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or I'm gonna find somebody who's a Hafiz or this, that, and the other. Then everything will be
Mm.
beautiful. I'll be in Jannah, right? All that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
I want to marry an alim to put me on the straight path.
That's it. Yeah, it'll be just an overnight thing.
Yeah,
The thing with that is Carl Jung actually says something that is just amazing, and a lot of his stuff is amazing. But he says something really relative. He says that he who looks outside dreams.
mm.
It's
Yeah,
like these people looking outside, dreaming that's
yeah,
going to happen. He who
yeah,
looks outside dreams. He who looks
yeah.
inside awakens.
Yeah, very good.
But the key
Yeah,
actually is to awaken. Is to
yeah,
awaken to our reality, to awaken to our shadows, to awaken to our trauma, if we have trauma,
yeah,
right? And Abby mentioned another thing about unhealed children become unhealed adults. That's exactly
yeah,
what happened to me.
yeah.
And the thing is that some of us, and I'm guessing many people don't even know this, but some of us actually have inner child wounds. We have mother wounds, we have father wounds,
Mm,
and so the experience that we had in our family of origin growing up has affected the way we see relationships.
mm,
if I saw my wife and I, we've seen this in couples that one couple, the wife, for example, grew up in a very, let's say, open-minded, very
Liberal.
connected, liberal,
Mm.
do what they wanted to a degree, to a great degree, family, and that was her upbringing. Whereas the guy was in a very traditional, connected, but less flexibility.
Mm.
Now, those two guys are struggling together.
Yeah.
The only reason they're struggling together is because what's happened is in those formative years, they've
Mm.
imbibed all of those characteristics and traits and are living those out without knowing that.
Yeah. And you know what? It comes down to what you were saying, that just when you have this fallacy about I'm going to change overnight if I marry an alim, the opposite also true, as you've just demonstrated. There are people who maybe in a courting phase of, or actually talking about a relationship between themselves and somebody who is not on the deen. Maybe let's just say a woman has a prospect who, and the guy he goes clubbing and drinks and does drugs or whatever, and she thinks that he'll somehow miraculously become
Yeah,
that guy she wants him to be overnight. And I would question that as well, because
I'll fix him. I will sort him
yeah,
out.
I'll fix him.
You
Yeah,
can't
marriage will fix him. And a lot of the parents in this country sometimes have done that with their sons, haven't they? Munda
fix
bigad gaya,
him.
let's go take him abroad, get him married. He'll be all right when he gets home. Zimmedari povegi, yahan pe theek ho jayega. But
That's
it's
right.
not usually the case. I think Bilal, brother Bilal Abdul, he's mentioned something profound here. He says we can never be like the Sahaba. But being divorced was no big deal back then. They would simply just marry again to save themselves from doing haram and have a mahram.
Yes.
And you know what? Sometimes we forget. We sometimes forget the reasonings behind marriage, or the wisdom behind why marriage is there for people. And I think in these kinds of countries where we're blessed to have so many amenities and so many supporting mechanisms, it's easy to survive without marriage as such. But the doors of fitna will always remain open,
So
and we will always. Go
yeah,
on,
no,
sorry.
Majid, I want to share something, from the stats again, and these are very revealing because some of the comments that we saw on your thread
Mm,
alluded to this, and it was all around, where the reasons for people divorcing.
okay,
That's
this
really
is
important.
interesting. Go
So
on.
the fallout is one thing, how people have been affected, but
Yeah.
why people divorce in the
Why did they
first
fall out in the first place?
place? So yeah, why did they fall out in the first place?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and the top reason, and I think this is why there's a lot of fear, is narcissism.
Narcissism. Wow. Okay. You know
Seriously.
what? I would argue a lot of people don't even know what narcissism is. They blame something they don't truly understand. But let's just stick with that anyway.
Yeah, yeah,
This is another topic of its own. Narcissism.
yeah. It's a huge topic, huge topic. My wife's an expert on it, by the way. Maybe I'll have her on at one point. But I
Yeah.
think we
Why
lots
not?
of people talk about it. But narcissism is literally the by far a clear winner.
But which narcissistic trait has taken the lead in that reasoning? That's
Actually,
the question.
I didn't actually delve into that in further detail and looking at what the quality was, but we know for a fact there's lots of data in terms of explaining those things and how it
Yeah.
affected them. The reasons, how
Yeah,
it
because
might.
there are a lot of different traits which can be ascribed to narcissism, and I think
Yes.
there's some traits which will be a collective of traits which would define, or you could say, yeah, that then can fit into the box of narcissism. But if it doesn't include some of these traits, then maybe it's not narcissism. It's, I don't know, maybe there's a guy's a psychopath, and I don't know.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of different.
Well, I hope
Uh,
Victoria can just please write a few comments. That'd be really helpful. The second reason for
go on.
divorce, I mean, classical, without thinking, and I want to direct this to the men. I really want to direct this to the men. Be
What kind
aware,
of men? Which men?
all types of men, right? And what they were saying was the second highest reason was that they didn't care for their feelings,
What, the men didn't care for their own feelings, or they didn't care for the spouse's feelings?
spouse's feelings.
Okay.
Now, culturally, again, let's talk real, right? Let's address the elephant in the room.
Mm.
How many Muslim men are romantic with their wives?
Mm.
How many men actually show their feelings?
After marriage, you mean? Yeah.
I
I think we will. We've,
like that point.
sorry, took you off there.
I wasn't expecting that one, but yeah, no, you're right, 100% after marriage. But yeah, it's that, um, but when I'm married now, so it's a done deal. What have I got to lose? And
Yeah.
chalo, jealousy, yeah. And the thing is, look, human beings want to be cared for,
Mm.
but I want to really give this reality check to men is that when our sisters are watching movies, watching these soaps, or they're looking at other couples, right,
Mm.
being very emotional,
Mm.
and they don't have it in their marriage, they're lonely again.
Mm.
That loneliness is there, like you said before. So, someone says romance is dead when you're married, right? And and
Mm.
and why is it dead? Why is it dead? Right? The risk that you take, brothers, is this: that when romance is dead in your marriage, guess what might happen?
They'll find it in someone else.
They may find it in someone else. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that not might be an intimate, a connection. It could be an emotional connection. It could be an intellectual connection with somebody, even online, right? A different type of a connection. So
Mm.
imagine living with someone, you
Mm.
don't give them the emotional, you don't fulfill their emotional needs, but they're getting their emotional needs from elsewhere. That's a really
Mm.
sad state to be in. And the third one was not far behind was cheating,
Right.
and that's another elephant in the room. We talk about many of the things, but not that actually there's a lot of cheating going on.
Mm.
And some of the stories I hear personally are just like terrible,
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah, I've come across a fair few myself. I think
Very
it's a lot of people think that it's just easier to brush it under the carpet than actually address the issue,
mm,
especially in the marriage.
yes.
Um, and I've come across, it's amazing. You come across women who would rather have the man cheat and
Yeah.
them knowing about it
Mm,
than accept him to have another wife instead in a halal way. She would
okay.
opt for the haram
Okay.
for faith's sake,
Mm,
for the sake of her family, friends, her position in society,
mm,
rather than say, look, you know what, if you're going to go and do it anyway, put a ring on it, make it halal. At
mm,
least don't put yourself
mm.
in that situation. We know you're at it anyway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
there be some that don't want both. Some don't want the infidelity, and some don't want the second. And there's always the in between and everything. But
mm,
I guess the most alarming thing in all of this, the conversation that we're having tonight, is this: that look, it's not black and white.
mm,
It's not black and white. There are many variations in between. There's lots of gray areas. But
mm,
what's certainly most important thing is that every single human being deserves, right, to have or live the life that Allah has destined for them,
mm,
right? They deserve to have that because they've been given this gift, they've been given this amana, this trust. They must live it to their full potential. And
yeah,
when we get into situations where we neglect ourselves
mm,
or we put ourselves second, by default, what happens is that we start to compromise, we
mm,
start to sacrifice, we start to do all sorts of things that we shouldn't do.
yeah,
So it's very important to reconnect with ourselves and make sure that my wife always says you've got to be the main character in your story. It's your life story. You have to be the main character. Everyone else is a supporting character.
mm.
Don't let somebody else be the main character in your life because that's
Yeah. You know what? I came across something else today because obviously there's a recent word in the dictionary that's come around, which is sonder, Sonder.
Okay.
which basically means imagine you are the main character
Right.
in this play that's taking place in your life. And that realization that you are a character and everybody else are playing their role, almost like all the world's a stage. I think William Wordsworth poem.
Right.
Um, well, that's the word sonder. And recently I came across somebody saying, don't just imagine you're the main character. Take yourself out of the character. Imagine you're watching a movie of yourself. Now look at yourself. Look at
Right.
yourself through an objective eye, not through
Mm-hmm.
your own eyes. You'll see something
Mashallah.
different.
I like that.
And that was profound. To me, that was worth contemplating. Mohammed Sahil says, "Is it normal for someone who is widowed to just not want anyone else, even when all those around you hope you do find someone, but you cannot bring yourself to think of having someone else again?" You know, this is a lot of things come into this. I think when you have, especially when you have children, then it often deters people from taking that step in case
Mhm.
it prohibits or hinders their love for their children.
Yes. Yes.
And I think it's a matter of perspective. Some people see it as being married to someone being an enabler. If somebody is there to hold you up high and support you to look after your children, then that could make you a better father than as opposed to you becoming or that person in the marriage becoming a hindrance.
Mm.
And likewise, you could do the same with somebody else. I mean, if it's two people who have had either somebody who's divorced or somebody who's passed away within the relationship, widowed or divorced, you know, these are people who are like Sister Victoria said. She would only marry somebody who'd been through a divorce because there are certain qualities they bring with them. And then, in such circumstances, people like this hold or have this very innate ability to help heal each
Mm.
other because
Mm.
they've been through some
Absolutely.
traumatic experiences themselves, which somebody who's single may not be able to do.
Yeah.
And there's a certain understanding. You're on the same wavelength in some regards. But again, it's important for you to understand yourself whether it is the right decision for you or not. And that's
Yeah.
something only somebody else can make. So you yourself can make, sorry.
Yeah. Now I was going to say, is it normal? You determine
Yeah.
what that normal means.
Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. Now, Brother Muhammad, I would say this to reflect on this, just this point is that look inward,
Yeah.
and you know your pain is only what you know what your pain is, and what you've been through or what you're going through right now. But look inward and ask yourself the question: am I single because I choose to be single and I'm confident in that decision? Or am I single because I have some doubts or apprehensions or some worries or fears? And only you can answer those questions.
Mm.
And that will give
100%.
you the answer to where you are. If you're happy in the skin that you're in right now, then absolutely you're
So
okay.
be it.
So be
Yeah.
it. Exactly.
Yeah. And on that uh, note, we have just crossed over the hour line. It's been
MashaAllah.
yeah,
Wow.
it's been a full hour already. Yeah, so we're gonna have to cut the conversation there. But thank you for joining us, everybody who has joined us. It's been a pleasure to read all these comments, and your comments have been very enlightening, actually, because. It's always interesting to see what other people think, and because obviously we're not always right as much as you'd like for us to be, uh, but we would always like to listen to what you have to say too, because we are obviously here to learn from each other. So if you haven't done so already, the Beardos Media Facebook group is there for you to actually connect with and get exclusive content. And if you want to join us on screen as a guest, that's where we post the link. So if anybody wants to join us on screen as a guest, that's the thing, they can get the link for that. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you do subscribe on the YouTube channel. I believe we're close to 100 followers now on YouTube. We've never really promoted the channel where we've got 100. If we're close to 100, if it's 98 or 99, just round us up to 100, please. Thank you very much. And other than that, hope you guys have a fantastic evening. I think we will do one more before Ramadan if we can squeeze one in. And then, as some of you know, I go on a social detox, so I'm not going to be online anyway. And Brother Taf, I believe you're going to take some time off from broadcasting over Ramadan, are you? Or have you got plans?
If Bedo's media is shut down for Ramadan, so am I, brother. Inshallah.
Excellent. So, in which case, in the meantime, you guys have fun, and inshallah, we'll catch you just before Ramadan, before we close for Ramadan, and we'll see you then. Take care.